We have a quorum of 6 of the 11 members. If there are no changes to the agenda, we will deem that adopted. You have been sent out the agenda of the minutes of the last time we met, the October 13th, 2021 minutes. I have not received any edits, and without objection, we'll deem that accepted. We have not yet at this time been joined by our newest commissioner, Anita Cox. And when Anita joins us, she did tell me in a conversation I had with her that she would be able to join this meeting. I'll ask her at that time to introduce herself and for us to introduce ourselves to her. I had a very pleasant, probably 40-minute conversation with her last week, and I found her very delightful and enjoyable, and I'm glad that she is joining the commission. So why don't we get started? We've got a very, very full agenda, to say the least. I wanted to start by considering each of the comments that we received one by one, whether they were at the listening sessions or the written submissions, and to go over them and to see what the commissioners think of them. So the first one is Lorraine Jaffe's written submission to clarify the proposed amendment to section 206 regarding the removal of the county executive. She was concerned that our proposed amendment might lead one to believe that it is politically motivated and that the mention of council members might simply be an afterthought. With that in mind, she requested that the language be clarified as to what constitutes serious misconduct or willful neglect, inasmuch as that she's of the opinion that those catch-all phrases are highly subjective and can be used for political purposes. Let me weigh in first. For sure, our decision to recommend a revision to section 206 was not politically motivated. Rather, as I saw it, and as I think the commissioner saw it, we were mindful of the recent developments in Baltimore as to their mayors, and wanted to have an avenue to remove the elected officials in our county who engaged in serious misconduct or willful neglect of duty. Now, in considering the language that we propose, we purposely rejected mere incompetency. Even though the Baltimore voters included that in their charter, we thought that that was too vague, and we thought that should be left to the electorate if they thought that the county executive was simply incompetent. However, we thought that by adding the language that stated that it had to be willful neglect of duty, and it had to be demonstrated over the course of 180 days, and it had to be consecutive days, that we thought we were setting a very high bar for removal. But to go further and cite specific examples in the charter, I think is neither practical nor desirable, because it can never be inclusive. Similarly, it would not be appropriate to try to cite to any and all examples of serious misconduct that an official might engage in. The burden is always going to be, the burden of proof is always going to be on those bringing the charge. Others, what others think?
George,
Ron?
just one other thing I'd like to add. We tried to make sure that it wouldn't be just one or two council members just willy-nilly starting stuff. It would have to be a vast majority. I think we put the 80% in there too. So that was another safeguard, so that if indeed someone's going forward, it would have to be a real effort to do so.
Good point. Others? Galina?
I'm a little bit puzzled with a situation about 180 days. It's kind of strange. We should wait 180 days and not to move a finger. if somebody violates duties or if any violation takes place, if any misconduct, if anything inappropriate, why we wait 180 days? Don't we have, I don't know the rules, don't we have ethic commission or something like that? Like I will drown and you will wait, did I drown, will I drown or not, and then take action. 180 days, it to me puzzling how it could be that person violate or inappropriate behavior and nothing at all happened. That's a little bit not clear to me, George.
Well, I don't want to speak for the full commission, obviously, but we debated that, and we thought some others felt that, and myself included, that if we didn't stick to a lengthy period of time, that some members of the county council could go after a county executive for a spurious reason without requiring it to be demonstrated over a lengthy period of time, and could have a recurring situation where county executives would be removed, to use the term that Ron was saying, for willy-nilly reasons. And although he was using it for the opposite effect. And as this person who testified, Lorraine Jaffe, was concerned that it could be used for political reasons, we wanted it not to be used for political reasons. So we thought setting a 180-day consecutive day bar would preclude that happening. I understand what you're pointing out, Galina. What happened if there's a really serious circumstance?
Right, and why we do not intervene early? If we see something very out of way, whatever, shouldn't we, I don't know, can we, may we invite executive and have like, not emergency, but some session and point that it's not, it's something wrong and correct.
Well, if it's a criminal in nature, there's another provision for that in the law. We're here dealing with the issue of competency, of wrongdoing, I should say. But I hear you. We can hear from others in the city. That's
Hey,
how we
George.
rock at it. David?
No, Zed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right. Just two thoughts. One is, and maybe I missed this, I would recommend instead of 80%, you choose a set number, because I don't know what 80% of 11 is 8.8 council members.
Right, and it comes to 9. When you round it off, it comes to 9, which
Then
is
why
much
not
higher
just-
than now.
Then why not just put, I mean, everywhere else, as I recall, it's a set number. I think kind of cruising for a bruising if you put a percentage. I understand you want it to vary, but I would choose a solid number that could be changed as the number of council members change. That's what's happening elsewhere throughout the charter and throughout the code. They're set numbers. The other thing I was going to mention about willful neglect, as I'm looking at this language, I think it might be interpreted that willful neglect has to last 480 consecutive days. Serious misconduct does not, the way it's written. It says serious misconduct in office or willful neglect. Then the next sentence is willful neglect has to be 180 days, not the serious misconduct. So if I were a judge, I would look at that and say, you know, intentionally or not, you've made a distinction between two types of misbehavior. One has a time requirement, the other doesn't.
I think you're right. I think that would be a correct reading of it. Ron?
Yeah, just a question for Ed on the number. The reason why we were thinking back, at least I was, for the 80%, is because we knew the charter was changing in terms of the number of council folks. So by putting it a specific number, what's your thoughts in case of any future change of the body? Of the
Well,
council?
it'll be there've always, all of the charter references, I believe, I mean, I'd have to actually look through, but I don't think any of them are percentages. Sometimes it'll say unanimous, but they're set numbers. And those numbers change when the number of members change, which isn't all that often, but when the numbers of members changes, as they're going to do this fall, the charter amendments are also going to increase the, I forget, I think the 5s are 6s and the 6s are 7s. They're all going to get ticked forward. So just 80% is just not it's not a whole number. And you're going to have, I don't know how often this would ever come into play, hopefully never, but I could see debate. I would just make it a solid number. I mean, if you want it to be 9 of the, and I would base it on 11 because that's what it's going to be.
Right.
So if you want 9, which is what I guess 8.8 is closest to, I would just put 9.
Okay,
Well, I'm definitely open to that. I think Ron is correct as to how we arrived at that. We clearly wanted to increase it above the current standard, which is 6 of the 9, which is obviously 2/3. We wanted to increase it. That was one of the arguments we went around and around on. We wanted to increase the bar. So we went to an 80%. When we were moving to the 11-member council, we know it was an odd number, which would end up being 9. And as Ron said, we wanted to keep it fluid for any future increase. As you're saying, Ed, it's a little awkward. If we're increased to a 13-member in the future, then the 80% would be a different number. But as you said, maybe that's a little awkward. And if the commissioners decide, as we deal with the third part of our agenda later, to go with just a hard number of 9, I'm okay with that based upon your advice.
so am I.
I was about to weigh in and agree with Ed's
David?
point. Yeah, I agree with Ed. I think it should be 9. But we don't need the bruising. There's going to be enough. There may be enough else in here.
Yeah.
That's just an ancillary issue that we don't need. So
Yeah,
just-
I agree with it. So any other thoughts and comments on this one before we move on to Melissa King's thing, which is actually similar? Well, we can group them together. All right, why don't we do that? Let's go on to Melissa King's.
1 second, George.
Oh, sure, Ron.
So we're talking about not only moving to 80% and moving it to 9, but also as part about the serious misconduct and willful neglect for the 180 days, that change as well.
No, that I don't think Ed was suggesting a change. I think he was just comment. I don't want to misquote you, Ed. He was just making the observation that there's 2
Right,
different.
the
standards.
language doesn't need to change. I was just saying how I think a court would interpret that.
Right,
So you
and
don't need to
I
change
agree with you, Ed. Yeah, I think he was just making an observation that it's a different standard. The 180 days applies to one part of the sentence, but
Okay.
not to the other.
Thank you.
All right, we can still consider that under the next one, Ron. Melissa King also spoke to section 206. She was also concerned that the amended language could be used as a political weapon to get, quote, get rid of someone the council doesn't agree with, end quote. She noted that the current council votes unanimously on 90% of the measures, and thus getting 80% to vote on removal is not a high bar. Although, as we were just talking about, 80% would now be 9 of 11. She believes that the public should have a recall option and not leave it to politicians to decide who stays or goes. She too believes misconduct is in the eye of the beholder. But as we know, Ed advised us early last year, I think, that recall is not an option legally, that the state constitution precludes recall at this point for charter counties. So I'm not sure if there's anything more to add, at least on my part, to the conversation that we just had as to this this provision. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, then let's proceed. The next one is Mark Lautman's testimony in opposition to the proposal as to the irreconcilable ballot questions. You may recall Mark from testifying last year before us. He's the former treasurer of the Committee for 9 Districts. He suggested that the commission drop its recommendation to address when 2 irreconcilable proposals are on the ballot at the same time. Instead, he proposes that the county council be precluded from placing on the ballot any referendum subsequent to a successful citizen-initiated petition. Now, although I understand Mr. Lautman's ire over the council's action in 2020, the fact remains, whether by action of the council or by action of 2 competing citizen-initiated petitions, voters may yet be confronted in the future, as we all recognize, by irreconcilable ballot questions, both of which may be approved. Thus, there is a need, as we recognize, for a charter amendment to bring clarity to what occurs under such circumstances. So I think what we've come up with as a solution makes sense. And so, speaking at least for myself, I don't see why we should change what we came up with. Anybody else have a thought on that? All right, let's move on then. Laura Mitchell testified before us as to charter language that she thought might be insensitive to mental health issues. You may recall that Ms. Mitchell is a member, or at least she was at the time she spoke to us, as to, she's a member of the county's Alcohol and Drug Abuse Committee. And she requested that we review the language of the charter with an eye toward any language that might be insensitive to the mental health needs of those with drug or alcohol concerns. She alluded to the recommendations of the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Kathy and Perry both asked Ms. Mitchell if she had any alternative language to suggest, but she didn't. Ms. Mitchell said she was going to email to Christine documents for the commission to review, but she didn't. She never sent them in. I think not having received the documents, the commission is at a disadvantage. I did a cursory review of the charter, and perhaps others did here, but I found no provisions that were in need of amendment for being insensitive in its language due to mental health concerns. I would suggest we leave this to a future commission to decide if it's worth studying at all. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Ron?
No,
You-
I'm just agreeing with you.
Okay,
Agreed.
great, Dave. Okay, next is David Tolman, who had I would say a novel suggestion to, he submitted in writing to revise the manner of selecting at-large council members. You may recall, he suggested that the 4 at-large council members be, quote, be appointed by the candidate for county executive in the general election in proportion to the share of the vote received by said candidates, end quote. Provided the candidate receives at least 25% of the vote. He didn't address how this would play out if there are only 2 candidates, or if only one receives 25% of the vote, or what he means by proportion. Now, maybe you guys understand this better than I did. I had a little trouble understanding it, but given that the voters of the county just chose to restructure the council at the 2020 election, obviously, I think it's far too premature to even consider the structure of the council. Any thoughts you guys have on this beyond what I just said?
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
given where we are, I don't think I won't weigh in. I agree with you,
It's novel. Would you agree it's novel?
It is novel.
It's definitely the most.
I'll just say I don't see any. I don't think he made the case for giving a loser in the general election such power. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't see the case made. I didn't see the case made.
It was interesting. I probably was the most interesting comment we got.
Hmm?
Probably the most interesting one. All right. Let's move on then. Ms. Herrera, who appeared before us at the last session, had several different suggestions. The first one, which I think, personally speaking, just for myself, I think maybe a good one, was to clarify the votes needed to remove the county executive for cause, beyond what we just talked about with Ed, maybe changing it from 80% to a specific number. Gee, now that I think of it, maybe we don't need that then. She had said, she brought to the commission's attention that a recommended change to section 206 to increase the percentage of the county council to remove the county executive of cause should be clarified by inserting current before council, having set that 80% standard. She thought that would be in keeping with what the commission had recommended, the county council had endorsed, and even the voters approved when they amended section 305 a number of years ago to clarify that only a vote of all the current council members had to approve an increase in the taxes above a certain rate. And that made sense. Do we now? So I was thinking, well, yeah, let's change that to add the word current. But now if we go to a specific number, would we have to do that? I was just adding the word current before the word council.
If you have if you have a specific number, current is,
Yeah, that's
I
superfluous.
wouldn't introduce that. Current isn't used anywhere else, and a specific number takes care of it. And
Yeah.
like I said, the number of members changes once every, 10 or 20 years, so they can change all the other numbers
Right.
at the same time, as we're about to do this with the next publication. Started.
Yeah, I was thinking if we had the percentage in there, it would make sense to add the word current, as she was suggesting. But now that if we go to the number, then I guess you don't need the word current, which was added to section 305 when it was a matter of unanimous. So you're right. The current would be superfluous. We wouldn't need that.
Yeah, and then people will start comparing it to other sections that don't have the word current, and they'll say, oh, this
Right.
must mean something different, and then you're down the road to something else.
Right. No, I agree. So again, my thinking changes now that we go to the word, go to the specific number. So thank you. Again, that makes sense to not go with that. Again, I originally thought she was right, but now that we've changed our position on the number. All right, let's go on to her next suggestion. The next suggestion had to do with the primaries. She recommended that in view of the fact that the history of county elections has shown that the winner of the Democratic primary most often determines the winner in the general election. A change in our primary elections is in order. She noted that the turnout at the June primary in a gubernatorial election year is usually low, with the Democratic nominee determinative of the eventual winner. She therefore recommends that the law be changed to move to a non-partisan primary in which all candidates compete irrespective of party affiliation. The two candidates receiving the highest votes would then move on to the general election ballot. She'd have this apply to both the county executive and the county council races. Clearly, what she's advocating is in place elsewhere around the country. I know most noteworthy in California for state elections. So I defer to you, Ed. Is this something we can do in the county charter, or does this require a change in state law?
The latter. It's requires a change in state law, and if you're keeping score at home, it's section 8-202, the election law article. If a political party chooses to permit voters not affiliated with the party to vote the party's primary election, the chairman of the party's state central committee shall so notify the state board at least 6 months before the date of the primary election. So you'd have to have, it's not up to the counties.
The county can't do it by charter amendment.
No.
Okay, so she might want to turn her attention to the state delegation. All right, then her last, her last recommendation was an interesting one, maybe as novel as the Mr. Tolman's. She made one final recommendation, which was to change the title of our county's chief executive from county executive to mayor. By doing so, she believes he or she would gain greater recognition, quote, would put us on the map, end quote, would allow us to, quote, govern as a city, unquote, and obviously would permit us to join the National Conference of Mayors. She's of the opinion that such a change would allow the county to assert itself more. Now, I see there's a reference in section 201 of the county charter, obviously of this, about the position being called county executive. What I don't know is whether it's simply within our province to recommend this as a change to place on the ballot, or whether this is something that's also governed by the state constitution. Ed?
It is governed by the state constitution. It's the Home Rule Amendment, Article 11A, Section 3. And I actually found a Maryland Court of Appeals case that, of course, came out of Montgomery County. This wasn't the main point of the opinion, but it said, one would, quote, one would hardly expect to call the chief executive officer of a county mayor. It's county council from Montgomery County versus supervisor of assessments from 1975. But no, that would also probably be an extraordinarily bad idea to, given the way all, state laws refer to, the different counties and the mayor, Baltimore City and the mayor, to change our title would really wreak havoc across state laws as they're written, but I don't think we have the authority to do that. So
it's interesting. Although I know that I think down in is it down in Florida? They call some of their executives of the counties mayor, along with the cities within those counties, I think, which I always found strange.
I'll offer you one bit of trivia. When they made the TV movie about the sniper, the Beltway sniper, they decided that Doug Duncan, in the movie, they refer to him as Mayor Duncan because people wouldn't know what a county executive was.
Really?
So there you go. Yeah, there's your bit of trivia.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie, but I don't
Yeah, I
remember.
remember that.
Well, go
Same.
back and watch carefully.
That's
But that's
interesting.
the only time I could think of anyone ever, called the county executive mayor. So no, I don't think it's set out in the Constitution.
Okay, so we don't have the authority to do it. I wouldn't have recommended it, but I didn't know we had the authority.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that advice, Ed, on those last two. All right, having gone over those, that feedback, let's roll over into the last part, which obviously speaks to the three issues we had set up from the beginning, while being open to other comments, obviously. And those are the three issues that we sent out for public comment. And this is the original language with one change that I put on the C, which I would now take off. Well, we'll make a change when we get to it. And to see if that's in keeping with what the commissioners want to move forward. The first one is dealing with the irreconcilable ballot questions. Are commissioners comfortable with the language that's set out there
Mhm.
that we originally had drafted?
I am,
That's David?
yes.
Ron as well.
Yes, I think. so.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, hearing. If I don't hear any dissent to this point, we'll move forward. That addresses what happens if there are two questions on the ballot, both approved, but are irreconcilable. The one with the higher votes would carry the day. That language is, I think, identical or almost identical to what's in the charter in Anne Arundel County, the only other jurisdiction that addressed that issue after the Court of Appeals addressed this issue in Baltimore City, having that problem that Ed brought to our attention, that decision. All right, the next one was, the issue is to address the length of term, the length of qualification to serve as county executive, from moving it from 1 year to 3 years preceding election or appointment, and for putting in place a similar qualification to serve as county council member. Does that language meet with commission's satisfaction?
Yes, for me.
Yes,
Galena,
Yes.
David? Okay,
Just a question, George.
sure, Ron.
The 30-year of age, that's only for the county executive, not for the council?
Yes, there's no, I don't think there's any age requirement for council members now.
Okay. Just clarifying.
Yeah, sure. And we didn't address that anyway. We were only addressing the years. All right, and then moving on to C, I would, the language there needs to be changed. So we knock out the 80%, knock out the word current in that first sentence, both of those. And we go back to changing from 6 to 9. So instead of the 80%, I've got to redo the language there to put 9 instead of 6. So the hard number of 9 instead of current. Okay. So we'll show it as, instead of 6, we'll have an underscore of 9. Strike the 80%, strike current. Yeah, that won't even show because it wasn't there in the original language. So it'll be 9 instead of 6 in both section 206 and section 118. Strike the word current, which was added. And the rest would be the same.
With those changes, I'm good with those proposed, with that proposed language for both 206 and 118.
Ron as well.
Hey, this is Chris. I have a question about the willful neglect of duty language. As I read it, that just includes absenteeism. Can anybody tell me, other than absenteeism, what would constitute willful neglect of duty?
How about being absent for 180 days?
Well, I mean, that takes me to Galina's point. You know, if they're absent for 180 days, that's pretty bad. So I would consider, if it's just absenteeism, putting absenteeism in there and maybe lowering the number of days required for that to trigger. Because that's what, 6
Half
months.
a year.
Yeah, this is Ed. It would include more than absenteeism. And, you know, you can be there every day, but not doing your job, or doing it at least as none other council members think constitutes willful neglect, not attending to work or problems, but you could be physically there. But again, it's like, what does high crimes and misdemeanors means? It means whatever you want it to be. I mean, that's the good or bad, depending upon your point of view of a, for lack of a better term, an impeachment provision like this is. It allows removal, but it gives broad range to determine what is, you know, willful neglect. And likewise for serious misconduct. I mean, we already have state law about criminal activity. This will leave wiggle room to determine what falls within this. You know, if somebody lies on a loan application, is that serious misconduct? You know, so that's the
I'm
wiggle
not a fan
room.
I'm not a fan of that language either, since the state constitution covers all of the criminal offenses. But I thought I would start with willful neglect of duty first and see if I could reach a consensus on something that's a little bit more narrowly defined.
No, I think it is more than just absenteeism, Chris.
Yeah, I agree. It's the failure to perform properly or neglect of duty is willful, and misconduct if he or she intentionally, knowingly, or deliberately fails to perform, or performs in a grossly negligent manner, or repeatedly performs negligently after prior warning or reprimand. So,
What are you reading from?
let's see.
I heard Perry talking. I couldn't tell if he was reading from a definition from some book or that's somewhere else.
Yeah, I just pulled up
Charter.
the definition from Law Insider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the general common definition, not legal authority, but I think it's how a person could interpret that phrase, willful neglect.
Yeah, I think that's exact. This is Ed. I think that's what would likely happen is they'll turn to contemporaneous legislative sources and, if necessary, dictionary definitions are still used to help flesh out these terms. And I'm sure we didn't invent the terms, serious misconduct and willful neglect. And there's going to be cases, and it's probably very much along the lines of what Perry just said.
Any other thoughts? Do we need to take a vote on the language on 206, or is anyone else of Chris's mind? All right, then should we proceed with the language with section 206 with the change as to excuse me, Susan? Who is that? I heard someone speak up. Actually, Susan's not on the screen. I don't know why I called her name.
It might have been me. I mean, if I understand the numbers are against me, so if we proceed, just have it noted that I don't agree with the language.
Okay. Well, Christine, if you reflect that in the minutes, please. Okay. Then we'll proceed with the language as a change to reflect the threshold of 9 votes on the county council, and striking the word current. Thank you, everybody, for your cooperation as we went through that agenda. Then here's my intention to do. I've been working on a draft report all along over the couple of months. Obviously, needing to finalize it after today, and I will do that. I will send out a draft report in the next couple of days, and the intent is at next month's meeting to review that report with everyone. Obviously, our goal, we have to submit a report to the council by May. And obviously, we have to finalize that by the April meeting. So at next month's meeting in March is when I'm hoping we can go over that. When I send it out in the next few days, I would welcome any corrections and edits, truly in the editing mode, simply corrections and edits of the minor nature, but of a substantive nature. We'll discuss that at next month's meeting. When I hope, maybe, fingers crossed, we can do that in person. So send your prayers to Christine that we can meet in person next month. I'd love to see all your shiny faces at that time, and maybe at that time we can meet our new member at that time in person.
Hey,
So,
George, that's putting
yeah.
an awful lot of pressure on Christine. I don't think that's
Sure,
fair.
why not?
I don't
Why
think it's
not?
fair to put that much pressure on Christine to answer all of our collective prayers on that point.
Hey, she gets paid the big bucks for that.
Well, let's add donuts to the list too.
Well, the prayers are also that the health trends will turn better also, of course. And I hope everybody is staying safe as best they can. I see your thumbs up, Kalina. I'll put my thumbs up also, okay? Thank you, everybody, and do stay safe. And thank you for your contributions today. Take care.
Take care.